Hello and welcome to Enlightened Empaths, your community for the spiritually awakened, where we discuss, explore, and connect with fellow empaths, healers, intuitives, and seekers. Hello, empaths. We hope you're having a lovely start to your week. We're going to be sharing our Community Connection show where we get to share with you all some wonderful stories and questions that you all have sent in. And if it's all right with you, Denise, I'll just start us off.
I'd love that. Thank you.
Yes. So our first one says, I was listening to your show this morning on the way to work, and you read an email from a listener who found herself waking up in her bedroom to see an unfamiliar PC on a desk and a man stretching and yawning near her bed. I was surprised when I heard the story and wanted to tell you what happened to me a few weeks ago. I had told my spouse about it and had forgotten, but now I'm intrigued. While in the same state of mind that your other listener was in, somewhere between asleep and awake, I experienced being in a very nice kitchen, sort of small and positioned off a dining room. Two little girls about 8 years old were in the kitchen and seemed to be playfully asking for something when a woman who looked to be about 35 walked in and started to sort of corral them in her arms, telling them to settle down and that they couldn't have snacks now. I could also see a gentleman behind the woman in the other room. He seemed to be doing something while sitting in a chair and not paying much attention. As the woman was gathering the girls up, she looked right at me. She didn't seem afraid, but slightly surprised. I too was a bit surprised when she looked at me, and I said to her, "Can you see me?" She seemed unafraid, almost intrigued, and calmly said, "Yes." And then I woke up. This was so clear and real that I had trouble getting out of the moment and back to my reality. I shook it off as a dream, but now I really am interested in other people having experiences like this. What is happening? I'm not sure if I'm afraid or excited, but do believe it is something. And the other listener's story, she was in what she believed to be her room, possibly in the future. Now I'm wondering if this was my kitchen and dining room, possibly in the future. Well, I think it's a possibility, don't you?
I do. I think it's interesting that more than one person had that same experience. I think that's very cool.
Yeah, I do too. And the fact that the woman could see her, doesn't it make you rethink the concept of ghost? I know we've talked about that many times in the show, but Lord Auerbach, I think, was the first one to talk about that concept of maybe all the ghost sightings we see aren't really ghosts, that they're just glimpses from the past or the future.
Right. And then you get into it's all happening at the same time, and you can go into the past and the future and different experiences. It is very, very interesting, but it also, the practical side of me wants there to be more evidence or validation to say this is what's happening. And you really can't apply it to this.
No, you really can't. Was it a dream? Was it a vision? The two of them interacted and saw each other.
But it also sounds like it was so vivid, so clear, so and that's what the person said. This was so clear and real that I had trouble getting out of the moment and back to my reality. Have you ever done that where you've gone so deep into a meditation or that when you have to fight to come back or say, oh, I really need to pull myself back into this everyday life?
Yes, and I actually love that feeling when I get there in meditation.
Me too.
I feel like I actually went somewhere, but I have to be honest. Denise and I were talking before we hit record that we've been getting so many emails from people saying that the energy feels a little off right now. And we were saying how, yeah, it does feel a little strange. I haven't been able to get there in the last couple of months with my meditation. That deepness.
So this is similar to a different conversation we were having, but I'm going deeper than I've ever gone. So isn't that interesting that we're having opposite reactions to it?
That is.
Huh. Be interesting to hear if anybody else is having weird stuff with that.
I know. I do think it ebbs and flows.
Oh, very much so. Incredibly so. And even from day to day, or from sometimes when you're trying to get into that meditative state and you're there and then you pop out and you pop in and you pop out. And then other times you just jump right in the deep end and you're soaking it for a while and it's great.
Yeah,
so,
it's a beautiful thing. For me, I feel like those retrogrades affect me and the eclipse season affected me. It just, I don't know, keeps me a little off kilter in terms of my inner centeredness.
Right. And the whole thing with Neptune shifting and from Pisces to Aries, there's a lot energetically going on right now.
There really is.
So it'd be interesting to see if that person has any more encounters with folks that way. I wonder
I
if it
know.
opens a
Let us
door.
know.
Yeah,
Or is that woman dreaming of our listener?
that's another whole way to look at it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's fun. All right, I'm going to jump into our next one because we could go on and on about this one. It's very, very intriguing. So our next one says, I was wondering if either of you have any advice about healing past life trauma. I had a reading recently in which I was asked about the past lives that are impacting me most in my current life. I was told I had a past life as a very impoverished woman who was incredibly mistreated and undervalued with several children, some of whom had traumatically died. The reader relayed to me how I was very unhappy and heartbroken and felt completely invisible in that lifetime, and how I didn't like being a wife or mother at all. In my current life, I have struggled with romantic relationships. I want a committed, loving relationship with someone more than anything. However, a huge block for me has been that I'm afraid of being in a serious relationship, getting married, having kids, and then regretting my choices and feeling miserable and stuck without any way to escape. Now that I know about my past life, in which I really did seem to be my experience as a married woman, I wonder if part of my fear about relationships and having kids in this current life stems at least in part from that past life. Do you have any practices or ideas about what I can do to heal and release this past life trauma, which I feel is preventing me from living the life that I know I do really want to live in my current life? I love that the person was able to make a connection between the past life experience and how it's manifesting in this life. Because sometimes we'll do past life regressions and it doesn't seem that there's a coherent thread between the two, that this feels very direct.
It definitely does. And there have been many, many stories where just recalling that past life starts the healing process.
Very, very much so. And it also allows that what I'm seeing is this person holding up a mirror and saying, okay, one way to look at this is you've had that experience. You don't have to do it again. You've lived that, you've had it, you've experienced that. If we incarnate into a new life for new experiences, you don't have to hit the replay button on that.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes this is why it is so important to write down or talk about our problems and worries, because it enables us to look at the language we're using. And the language that she used when she started talking about marriage, I found interesting.
Yes.
Regretting my choices and feeling miserable and stuck without any way to escape. Wow. First of all, it is 2025 and divorce is an option. I'm not saying that you should ever go into a marriage
Right.
thinking that, but you wouldn't be stuck. And secondly, it just makes me feel that she needs to cultivate around her positive examples of happy marriages and families. Maybe read some books or watch some happy rom coms where you just see people that are in these authentically happy relationships. I would recommend doing a cord cutting to that past life memory. I would recommend sending love and healing to that woman in that past life episode who was so just separated and removed from who she really was and unhappy. And then I would recommend doing some heart chakra work, especially with crystals, because I think they're wonderful and can help, but especially with heart chakras. Rose quartz is great for that. Malachite is wonderful. Botswana agate is great for past life healing as well.
And what those are all beautiful, beautiful suggestions and recommendations. And I think too is ask yourself what you really want a relationship to be. And what would it take for someone to come into your life that you didn't feel stuck or you didn't feel trapped? And it might be you need to do a relationship a little bit differently than what might be considered a normal marriage by society standards.
Yeah, exactly. And that's okay too.
It is. It very much is. But I think just the fact of looking at this and seeing it for what it is a huge, huge, huge first step.
Yeah. And I think any reading she could do with Dr. Brian Weiss, he has some great books on past life regression and healing, and he has some good guided meditations that she could check out to help with sending healing energy back to that woman as well.
That's beautiful.
Okay, our next one says, I really enjoyed your podcast episode February 3rd called Intuition or Coincidence. You made me recall my own astronomically impossible coincidental experiences. My belief now is that these experiences were playing the long game and setting up my spiritual development by opening my mind to bigger possibilities. Through my job, I got to know a couple we'll call Sally and Dawn. We did not associate much. I think my wife and I had one dinner with them. We did learn that they were building a sailboat with the plan to sail off around the world somewhere. After some time, they did exactly that. I completely lost touch with them. Mild acquaintances sailed away, that was that. Somewhere between 5 and 8 years later, after a tiring day at work, I happened to be driving along a relatively twisty little two-lane country road near where I grew up, my mind pleasantly adrift. I started thinking, I wonder whatever happened to Sally and Don. Where in the world might they be now? A little further up the road, I saw a car approaching from the opposite direction and thought, wow, that looks like Sally and Don coming right now. Since it was a little road and I still had excellent vision at the time, it was easy to see who was in the car coming the other way. Here's where it gets interesting. As they were about to pass by, I had a huge smile and waved like a maniac. But when they went by, I was surprised to see that it was not Sally and Don. Instead, it was a couple I'd never met that didn't even look much like them. I was embarrassed and felt idiotic. I drove on. Maybe a half mile or so further up the road, another car came in my direction. I was still thinking about my long ago acquaintances, but I didn't want to embarrass myself, so I kept my cool. As they came by me, I clearly saw it was, in fact, Sally and Don going the other way. What were the odds that this was a coincidence? A little road I rarely traveled anymore? A couple I knew maybe 8 years ago who had sold everything and gone sailing around the world? I don't think they had ever lived anywhere around here. The little road is maybe 5 miles long in total. The time of day allowed me to see the people in the other car very clearly. I had thought they were there, but they weren't. Then 2 minutes later, of all the people in the world, they were there. Coincidence? Impossible. And yet they were very minor acquaintances. Why would the universe manufacture such a thing? Why so much ado about nothing? I think I get it now. It was preparation for the long game. Many years after all this, I started listening to enlightened empaths, psychic teachers, and several other podcasts. I also heard the podcast Where Is My Mind by Mark Gober, a very science and logic based presentation, which suited my thinking at the time. I do highly recommend it. The Sally and Don experience and several other equally impossible coincidences proved to me there is more than just coincidence at work. It helped me rethink basically everything I had formerly believed about the universe. It made me really listen to these podcasts more carefully than before. It put me in a more open frame of mind. It helped me understand the near death experience I had when I died of pneumonia at the age of 19, a whole long story in itself. My coincidences went a long way toward helping me better understand and maybe change the entire direction of my life. That's a good enough reason to have impossible coincidences for me. It's a long game leading to future understandings. I just love that story, Denise, because we do often experience those weird quote unquote coincidences, and they're about something pretty minor. Like Sally and Don, this acquaintance couple he hadn't seen in 8 years. Why would he think of them in this random town? Why would he think he saw them? And then poof, they would appear. There's nothing came of it. It's not like they bumped into each other at lunch later that day and decided to work together on an amazing life changing project. But those little tiny coincidences are little signposts along the way of the long game, as he calls it, where we can really start to wake up and see that there's so much more to this world we're living in.
And also to foster trust. It can be a wonderful way to just start to believe the bigger things that come through. But the fact that it was so spontaneous, it happened wasn't thinking, it just was random. It just came in out of left field. That's how intuition works. And we've talked about this before. It often is very subtle or seemingly unconnected. But I love this story too, because it really, it is a long game. And that's a great line. It's a long game leading to future understandings. We have to look at it as a progressive journey, not just a one and done.
Yeah, exactly. And you never know what it's going to take for a person to go, now I get it.
Right.
And I think coincidences are a great way to propel a person along their spiritual journey.
It's fun too that one part that glitched me a little bit was the first car that,
Yeah.
oh, I think that's them. Oh, hi, I'm waving. And then it wasn't them. It's like, oh, I'm a fool. Why was I waving to those people I didn't even know? I wonder if they waved back. I hope they did.
I hope they did too.
If people wave at you crazy, do you wave back crazy?
Yes, it
Okay,
is a
good.
peeve of mine when people don't.
Some people don't. They just stare at you. Then I just wave even crazier, which is more fun. But
We used
anyway.
to live in a very wavy neighborhood. Whenever you walked or drove past anyone, you always waved. And there was this one family that never waved back.
Oh,
I used to complain to my kids. I'd be like, don't they understand the protocol?
there are certain parts of the country where you just wave at everybody. You don't have to know them. You just wave.
It's just a nice gesture.
It's considered polite.
Okay, again, focusing on words, you used the word glitch,
Okay.
right? When you were talking about when he saw the first car and it wasn't them, that was my first thought was a glitch in the Matrix. Like he had, like it was almost like a redo on a video game.
Okay. And that's not a word I usually use. It even felt funny coming out of my mouth.
Interesting.
Huh? Coincidence or intuition? Okay, our next one. Maybe we'll have another little fun step into another world here. I had a dream where I was pulled into a world. Okay. A past world. I'm in my present adult body. There's someone standing in front of me. We're in a small wooded area. I don't know how I know, but as children, we ran through these woods playing. I can feel an energy moving back and forth between our chests. We're somehow comatose. Then I hear someone calling my name. I know it's my name in this dream, but it's not my current name. I don't recognize this voice or the name being called. However, I know it's my mother calling me home. She calls me Melisi. In the dream, I recognize the friend I'm playing with as someone I know in my waking life. My dream and my friend and I in the dream start to wake up, and then this cord from behind me pulls me fast and hard from this world, and I'm wide awake lying in bed. I'd never heard that name before. Then I took a DNA test. I didn't know my grandfather, so I started building a family tree, and right there in the tree was the name Malisi. She was my great-grandmother. This is not the first past dream I've had. My question is, could this be a past life of mine? Are my family members trying to tell me something? The name freaked me out the most. I had never heard this name before. And the other person in my dream, I don't know this other person well enough to ask, nor have I seen him in years, but do you think this other person could be having the same dream? Ooh, that's a lot.
That is a lot. I've had that experience of the cord pulling me back. It's really weird too when it happens. The first time I was having that dream that I often have where I'm at my little oceanside cafe
Right.
and I was sitting with my dad, and he was alive and well at the time, but in the dream we were just sitting by the ocean and I'm in the dream, I'm talking to him and I can hear my alarm clock in my real life going off. And my dad heard it too because he goes, "Looks like our time is up." And then it was like I was a Chatty Cathy doll, with the string in the back of my
Yeah.
back, and I could feel something pull in the center of the back of my chest, and I was slammed back into my body, and I woke up.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's really strange. Now, the fact that this was a name that was connected to a family member, that's very interesting. I wonder if, obviously I believe that our soul travels when we are dreaming many, many nights. I wonder if she was just traveling to visit family members and this great great grandmother was showing her some of her favorite memories.
Right. Or was it a past life connection? I mean, it could be that. It could
Yeah.
also be that what popped into my head was, is this person doing deep personal work right now that is causing a ripple of healing back to that ancestor who didn't have the supports in place and it got passed down? So is there something with Melisi that's connected to this person?
That makes a lot of sense too. Now you're more educated in the past life field than I am. Haven't you read that everyone you know in your life you've known in past lives?
I have read that. And it's sometimes people might think that it's just, oh, it's my immediate family, but it could be your best friend was once your sister, or your father was your nephew, or it could be that you were business partners with someone. From what I understand, we choose different relationships with people for learning and growth. When we had Wendy on the show, I have to go with that as well, that I guess we won't really know until we get there, but it's very, very interesting. Remember when I did that class with the group last year and I said that I did a meditation and met this woman and she gave me a name, and you and I, we've
Yes.
been very open about the fact that we don't get names. I think when a name is involved, it gives it more validity, especially if you can find the name.
Yes, I agree.
It
I
changes
agree.
it.
And so maybe she had a past life connection with this friend in her current life that she also saw in child form in the dream.
Yes,
It's
it's fun to think about.
this could be another example of the long game where it's just propelling her further on her path
Right.
to explore, but that's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, this next email comes from a lovely listener and guest that we had on the show last year, Meg Calvin. If you guys remember, she was the writer who helped other writers get published and promoted and out there. And she wrote in to share this wonderful story. She says, my daughter was struggling one morning. She usually loves school, but something felt off. There was a nervous energy present. As a mom, I tried everything I'd read in all the conscious parenting books, breathing exercises, talking it through, visualizations, but nothing was helping. After about 20 minutes, I could feel her spiraling, and I didn't want to pretend everything was okay when it wasn't. Then I remembered something Samantha once shared about drawing a protective carriage like in Cinderella around her daughters to protect their energy from others. Since my own daughter loves Cinderella, I adapted it into something special just for her. I knelt beside her, took her hands, and told her to imagine a magical carriage, one that surrounded her like a protective circle. I told her that this carriage was her safe space, filled with bravery, calm, and strength. I even drew it around her with my hands, under her feet and all around her body. I described it to her as I drew it, just like the one in the latest Cinderella movie, the one written by Kay Cannon on Prime, that my daughter adores. And then she just lit up. Her eyebrows lifted, her breathing slowed, her tears stopped. She hugged me, took a deep breath, and walked into her classroom with courage. When I picked her up later that day, she said, Mama, all day I felt like I was in my brave carriage, and her day went much better than she expected. And she showed me this picture I'm sharing with you now that she drew. You can look closely at all the mantras she drew inside for herself to embody. And it is such a precious, beautiful drawing. And she put all these little words around herself in the carriage. Continually since this occurrence in the hall, she has returned to her carriage of bravery. This moment reminded me we can protect our energy. We can teach our children to protect theirs too. We don't always need the perfect words. Sometimes all it takes is imagination, intention, and love. Isn't that so true?
It's so true. And it's so beautiful how she empowered her daughter to have control over her energy and her environment. That
Yeah,
is, and you never know, you make a comment and someone is able to use that skill set in a way that fits for them. That's incredible.
it really is. And so I think when we can help our children that way, we're giving them such powerful tools to take with them into adulthood as well.
And she didn't mention how old her daughter is, but recently we did an episode with Jen and Kate, who have written the children's book, Claire and Her Magical Friends. And it talks about, it's a beautiful little book that will be coming out in May for Mother's Day, right around Mother's Day, roughly. And it talks about all these different characters who embody different Claires. So Senti is clairsentient and Voya is clairvoyant. But that would be a great resource, is to start to make this a more open conversation with our kids about how they're wired, how they feel their environment. I think it's so, so vital right now during these times.
I do too. Especially when you're a little intuitive, empathic kid. Do you remember those? Like, usually I love school too. And there would just be those that 1 or 2 or 3 days a year where I just did not want to go to school for whatever reason. Do you ever have memories of that when you were a kid and feeling like when your mom or dad or your bus dropped you off, you were about to walk into prison?
Maybe they were going to a facility. Sorry, we were having a conversation before we recorded, and the word facility came up, and it was good for a laugh. So I just
It was a
wanted,
good laugh.
it was.
Well, fun,
Yes,
sure.
yes. And I think that schools are supposed to be these loving, open places. There is a lot of energy, all those people, all those behaviors, oh my goodness. It's like going into any big institution. So for a little empathic person, it's even if they're happy and they love it and they love their teacher and they want to be there, it's a lot to deal with.
It really is. And so, I have an ebook on my website called How to Raise an Intuitive Child that just has all sorts of tips and techniques like this because it really helped my kids. And I wish it was something I had had as a child. But I think having like a regular bedtime and morning ritual routine is so important for little empaths. And that's what we would do every day on our drive to school is I would tell them to imagine, Cinderella's carriage, and her carriage is always outlined in gold, and gold is such a protective energy to pull into your aura. And I would have them sit into the carriage and then run their finger around the door to seal in the energy. Sometimes, if especially as they got a little bit older, I would have them visualize jumping into a cloud of just white, puffy protection and happiness, or to visualize their angel's wings surrounding them and holding them in a protective embrace.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But I do think those things help a lot.
Yes. Yeah. And I love that the little person was able to keep that energy with them and now has a tool that they
Me
can use
too.
whenever they're feeling like they need to be brave.
Her carriage of bravery.
Yeah, it's very cute. Okay, our next one. Can I ask you what's up with the energy lately? I think we're all asking that.
Hmm.
I used to see shadowy figures in my room about 20 minutes into sleep. I'd wake up and they'd be there. Since opening up and working with my abilities, it's several years later and I do mediumship part time on the side. Lately, I'm noticing I'm having to sage because these ghostly people are getting in at night. Ooh, I'm saging weekly at this point. This week I saged, and that very night I saw a shadowy woman in my bedroom. It freaked me out, so I did the Reiki symbol, Chukare. I have now been saying the Our Father, too. Why are they still getting in? I thought I was finally okay and doing better, but things that were working are now not. You know, the universal rule, law, doctrine, whatever we want to call it, is if you tell them to leave, they have to leave. And that one's never failed me. You might have to be really forceful, but if you don't want them in there, tell them to get out. And just to validate for this person, there has been a lot of extraneous energies popping in and out that aren't connected with readings, that aren't connected with, it's just odd. It's odd times right now with extra energy around. Have you found that as well?
Yeah, yeah. And like you and I were talking before we started recording, we've been getting a lot of emails like this. And this one just kind of stands for some of the others because a lot of people are writing in saying the energy is off and it feels very positive and very negative and like swinging between the two. And normal stuff that they do to feel grounded and centered and protected aren't working as strongly. But Denise is right. Who have to use such forceful language. And I always use the words command and demand. And I've had listeners come at me for that. They're like, that's too strong, that's too
Oh,
forceful.
really?
Yeah. And I'm like,
Huh?
well, okay, if someone like physical in the third dimension broke into your home, would you be like, excuse me, sir, could you put that gun away and tiptoe back out where you broke in? Like, no, you would command and demand that they leave and you'd call the police. It's the same with these things. You have to command and demand that they leave and then call in the police, i.e., your guides, your angels. For me, that would also be Archangel Michael, but it has to be someone that resonates with your belief system. But you have to be very, very strong and forceful. You can't have that question mark energy in your tone or your words.
And the interesting of this person is saying that they're saging weekly and that they saged, and then that night a shadowy woman was in the bedroom and did the Reiki symbol and has been saying the Our Father. I mean, those are all strong and powerful tools as well.
They are, but they have to be used correctly.
Okay.
So, for example, when you use Reiki to clear or protect a room, you have to draw the symbols into your palms, and then you have to visualize or actually draw them in the air over each of the four walls, the floor, and the ceiling. And you have to do a tapping motion with your hands, putting those symbols into the walls, floor, and ceiling 3 times each.
Oh,
And same thing with smudging. If you're going to smudge your house, you have to smudge the whole home, including attics, closets, the garage, basements, bathrooms, everywhere. You can't just light sage and let it burn in one room and say, "Well, I saged my house today." No. And then you have to let that smoke go through every room of that house for a couple of hours, at least one full hour. And then you have to open up windows or a door to let that energy out. So I think a lot of people think they're doing the protective things, but they're not doing them fully.
right. And I do think it's important to, I don't think command and demand is too strong because, as you said, these are showing up randomly. They weren't. The other day I did readings all day, and at the end of the day, I went back into the room where I do readings and I felt an energy there. And I said, hell no, you weren't invited to be here. And it was just like, poof, it was gone. So treat these energies the way you put it beautifully. Treat them the way you would treat someone that shows up unexpected.
Yeah.
You don't, and I'm not discounting when something hangs around or when you're feeling, because believe me, I've had many, many times where my default is the Hail Marys. That's where I immediately go the Lord's Prayer, but also Hail Marys, or they go on loop tape. And call in your guides, call in your angels. If you work with power animals, if you work with a team from the other side, just call in the big guns to help you. You don't have to do it alone.
No, no. And don't forget sound healing. You can
Right,
play healing sound music throughout your home as well.
right.
Okay, our next one says, I wanted to write in and share a short story. A few weeks ago, I was out on a drive listening to your episode on intuition or coincidence. I would like to start by saying that I am a homebody and love alone time. I also live far from town and do not go very often. I've recently been craving more community, so I've been making myself go out into town and go on car ride adventures. This day, I drove to a fun health food store 1 hour away from me, which I've never done by myself since I moved to where I live today. So it felt like an accomplishment, and I was proud of myself. On my drive home, I randomly got the nudge feeling to turn off onto the mountain parkway. It was a spot I have never been to, and I just turned onto the road not knowing where I would go. The road ended up being closed, so I was at a stop sign with no other cars around, and when I looked up, there was a bald eagle flying in a circle in front of a beautiful half moon. This was midday, so extra magical to see a clear moon. It was so magical, and it made me feel loved, guided, and validated for going on the adventure. I was so grateful I listened to that nudge to turn on that random road. Since then, I have been going on even more adventures alone, and it is bringing me a lot of joy and confidence. So, was it my guides who nudged me to turn? I think so. Well, I think so too. And I think it was almost like a spiritual reward for you to see this beautiful image of this bald eagle flying over the moon.
That's,
Like, as though they were cheering her on, going, "Good for you, you got this."
yes. And that's a powerful sign to have come in and just to have it circling around, not flying by or up in a tree. If we're going back to coincidence or intuition, my gut would be she was guided to that spot to see that.
And what's stronger than an eagle?
Right.
I mean, it's, the symbol of our country because it's so strong and independent.
Oh, and to see things from a bigger view, to see the details in things. They're messengers between the worlds. There's so much. And sometimes I've been doing this more and more when things are coming in writing or meditation or working with people is looking up. It's as easy as a Google with spiritual symbolism of, and just look up and see what resonates with you, because often it can be flowers, it can be colors, it can be anything at all. But I'm finding that spirit is really, really pulling out the stops to get our attention right now with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know why this is coming into my head, but I remember years ago I was doing a reading for this woman, and towards the end, as we were wrapping up, she looked out the window and we saw that half moon in the day. It is really cool when you see that during the day of light, during the light of day. And she said, "Oh, look, Mother Mary is saying hello to us."
Oh,
And I was like, "What? What are you seeing?"
yeah.
What are you talking about? And she said, "Well, growing up, I was always taught that, God is like in charge of the sun, but Mother Mary's in charge of the moon. And so when you see the moon during the day, it's a hello from our mother energy."
Oh,
Have you ever heard that?
no.
No, me neither. But I loved it. I never forgot it.
Right. So it is kind of comical that listening to the podcast on intuition and coincidence, and then getting this nudge of a feeling to turn onto a specific road, and then a spot she'd never been to. It's beautiful.
It really is. And I feel like the more we do that, the more we follow those nudges, even if they're just small ones, like take this road home instead of that road. They can be huge, the ramifications, but it's also sending a message to your guides and yourself. I trust you. I trust myself. I trust my intuition. And the more we do that, the more nudges we're going to get.
And you and I have always been very open about needing time alone to recharge our batteries. And I think with the world being there's a lot of energy right now, as we mentioned in the last story, and there's a lot of decision fatigue. There's a lot of choices. I mean, it goes on and on and on. If you can carve out a few minutes to yourself to just be with your own energy, and that's an excellent, excellent way for intuitive or mediumship development, is get comfortable with what your own energy feels like, and it's going to make it easier to read others' energy.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great, great advice. Well, these were some fabulous questions and stories.
They were fun.
I love them. If you guys have a question or story you want to send in, remember, just email us enlightenedempaths@gmail.com, because we love hearing from you guys. And it's so interesting to see the experiences and the dreams and the visitors and the synchronicities that you all are experiencing. And I think the more we share these with each other, the more we realize anything is possible.
And with the first example, it's perfect, because how many times have we gotten follow-up questions, or, oh, that happened to me, or that reminded me of when that happened in my life? It validates how interconnected we all are as a community.
Yeah, and you know what I like about our show is we'll often get questions that start with, "I've never told anyone this before."
Right.
Because some of the things that happen when you're on this woo-woo path are really strange, and you don't want to tell people. "Oh, I think I dreamt of a past life," or "I think I saw an acquaintance in my dream." You just doesn't really come up in random conversation.
Right. And it doesn't have to be so esoteric and airy-fairy woo-woo. It can just be conversation, which I
Yep,
love.
me too. And that's why we do this podcast, is to foster that community.
That's right.
Thank you guys so much again for listening and checking us out. If you like the show, please tell a friend or consider leaving us a review so we can continue to grow our community. We hope you have a beautiful, magical week filled with lots of coincidences and wonderful, happy dreams. Remember, as always, to show up, do great work, and share your light.
Take care.